In this episode, I'm going to cover combining an MVP4g GXT application with an App Engine server web hosting. I'll start off by using MVP4g with an App Engine server. Then I'll talk about the first stage of combining so we can create Maven modules. And then after that, I'll cover debugging with the code server, all the while using a launcher directory to push the resources to a web app folder. To get started, I'm going to go to my file manager, and in this case I'm using the Mac OS file manager. It's going to look a little bit different on Windows, but the same concept can be applied. So what I'm looking at doing is identifying the modules I've already created, and what I mean by modules is the applications that I've created in their standalone form. So what does that look like? Well, on the left here, at the top, I have the GXT application and I named it Mountains. So this is the GXT application I created in a previous video, and I'll link that in the video description and a card at the end of this video. And below here, I have the App Engine server application I created in a previous video, and I'll link that below and put a card at the end for that as well. So what I want to do is create a new folder and show you how I create the new structure for both of these and how I combine them. So what I want to do is create a folder for both the Mountains and Mountain server. And what do I want to name that? I'm going to name it, let's say, new folder. I'll go Mountains app. Okay, so that's my Mountains app. And I'm going to go into Mountains app. Let's just look at that in a new tab here. And so this is going to be my Mountains app. So what I want to do is copy it here, and then I'm going to go to the right in my Mountains app directory here, and then I'm going to paste it. And this on Windows, like I said, will be in a file tree, and you can copy and paste. The idea is to move both these applications into one folder, and I'll show you why here in a second. And I'll copy this and paste it in. Okay, so now I have the start of my Maven modules project. Well, in a later episode, I'll cover putting a POM here at the root of the project to combine both of these modules together. And why would I put a POM? Well, the POM.xml is the directions for the Maven build system for both the IDE import and build instructions for deploying and debugging. Okay, but I won't cover that in this episode. Okay, so what I want to do is look at these real quick, and I can see both children or both child modules have a POM XML. Then I'm going to test this environment and mock this scenario in Eclipse to start with. And I want to show how the debugging will work. And then in a following episode, we'll come back and we'll configure the build system. And by the way, if you wanted to create the Maven project with a GWT client-side module and a server-side module, let me show you that. I'll go to Thomas Breuer's GWT Maven archetypes, but before I explain this in a little bit more detail, by the way, if you like what he does, go ahead and start. Let's see how many stars we can add. And if you go up here and you press on star, you become a stargazer. That's just giving the contributors and the project owner high fives and saying thank you for providing this project for us. And he's done a great job. So if you go down, there's a generate project, and you can run this and then choose modular web app. That's one of my favorite Kickstarter applications for a Maven project for GWT and GXT, and that I like to start here. And once you do this, it's easy to add in the App Engine pieces. Some later time, I'll cover that in another episode. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is go into Eclipse, and my Package Explorer here is in working sets. And why do I do that? It's so I can have multiple projects opened or closed in my Package Explorer, and I can focus in and drill into what I'm working on currently. I may touch a lot of projects, and they may be dependencies, so I use working sets to divide and conquer my workflow. So let me just use that in this example. I'm going to go configure working sets, and I'm going to add a new working set called GXT MVP4g and App Engine. Okay, let me just correct that. And then what I want to do, I don't have any of the projects loaded yet, so I'm going to click on Finish and OK. So that gives me a container to put my new projects in. So what I want to do is import the two projects. And by the way, if you already imported it from a previous episode, keep in mind you'll need to remove them because the namespace. I didn't talk about the artifact IDs. If they're the same between more than one project, you'll need to rename one of them and import it. So it looks like it's two different applications. Okay, so then I'm going to go Maven, or go import. And what I want to do is import existing Maven projects. And if that doesn't show up, type in Maven, it'll filter it. And select existing Maven projects, and I'll select next. And then I want to browse to that directory I created for multiple projects. Well, that's in my training, GXT, and then it's called the Mountains app. And that's going to be the root of my project. Okay, so in the root of that project, I have two applications per se at this point. They're going to become modules, which will be dependent on one larger application, so they could be considered as two child modules of a parent module. Okay, so I'm going to click Finish, and it imports them. Okay, so I have the MVP4g project here, which is a GXT project as well. And then I have the Mountain server, which is the App Engine server project. Okay, so now that they both imported, I want to debug it. Well, how would I debug it? Well, let me look at how it's configured to start with. So if I go to Source, Main, Web App, and here I have my Web App directory. And in the Mountains project, it was partially configured as a web application as well. So I need to move a couple things. The first thing to do is look for the static resources. What I want to do is copy these, and I'm going to copy these and move them to my web app folder, my new server web app folder, because I no longer need a web app folder in the Mountains in my GWT client-side module. I just need it in the server module. Okay, so I'm going to move that. So I'm going to go server and paste that in. And what's important in Mountain HTML, it doesn't have to be named Mountains HTML. It could be index.html. But the important piece in here is it loads this script here, which loads your GWT application. In this case, it's going to be a GXT application as well. So that's the script that's important. Okay, so now that I've identified Mountains HTML that is important in the project, I also have an index.jsp. So I could go into the servlet container directions, which is in the web XML folder. So instead, I'm going to go mountains.html. And what that does is basically say, if I'm loading up the root of the project, that will give me the welcome file or the welcome page as mountains.html. But that doesn't mean I could add index.jsp in the URL. I could dial that up as well. Okay, so that removes, let me just remove it because I no longer need it here. And I'm going to delete. I don't need the web INF because that was a generic web XML with the same welcome file. And I'm going to delete that as well. So I do not need that. And the web app, I do not need this either. And you can see something happening here. There was a red X that comes up. Well, it moved to the root of the project. Let me show you how to get rid of that by right-clicking on the project. I'm going to go to GWT, Settings, and I'm going to look for a web application. Well, the palm.xml can tell this settings configuration how to configure. Well, I can unselect that because I removed it. Well, let's just apply it and close. If I right-click on it, go Maven, update, it may come back. So let me update the project and right-click on it and go GWT Settings and Web Application. Well, in this case, it's no longer updating because the web app folder is gone. So that's good. So that's the first step. And if I look at General Settings, I have the Mountains. And this is defined, let me close this, and this is defined by the module.gwt.xml. And in this case, in a GWT app POM configuration, if I look at GWT app here and go to the POM, I can scroll down and see packaging is set to GWT application, not a WAR. Let me go to the App Engine to show the difference. I'll go to the POM, and this is going to be set to packaging of a WAR configuration. And if you look down here, let's look for packaging. And packaging says WAR. So there's two types of configuration in the POMs that are being done here. The Mountains, which is the GWT application, and the client-side code is going to be set to GWT app, and the Mountain server is set to WAR. Okay, so now that So now that that's finished, let me close these files here. I'm ready to create a launcher to debug the application. Well, how would I do that in a server application environment? Well, the first step is creating the server. So let me do that and show you how I do that. So what I want to do is go to the debug perspective, and there's two ways to do that in Eclipse. I can go up to Window, Show Perspective, and I can open Perspective and I can click on Debug. Well, the first time you do this, it puts a button over here on the top right where I can go to the Debug Perspective as well. Well, I've already done it once, so I'm going to click on the right button. So now that I'm in the Debug Perspective, what I like to do is go over here to the tabs and look for the Server tab. If the Server tab is not here, you can go Window, Show, View, and then Other and look for Servers. So it is here, so what I want to do is just drag it over and make it have its own real estate. And so now that it has its own space, I like to click on No Servers and Are Available. And what I want to do is create an App Engine server for my new project. If you already have an App Engine server, either delete it or create a second one with a different name. You can do that by changing the name here for server name. So let me do that. I'm going to rename my server, and I'm going to name it App Engine and MVP4g or G and GXT application. Okay, so that just gives it a unique name for my project. So I'm going to select Next. And now that I come here, if you don't see your project showing up, go back to the App Engine episode and I talk about that caveat in that episode. In this case, it shows up. So I'm going to add it to my configured projects and click on Finish. Once it's finished, I am ready to go. I can start the server in debug mode, which I'll do here while I'm here, and go Start Debug. Debug means I could breakpoint on the server side code. So what I want to do is look at the page. Well, it loaded up at 8080. And let's see, now I could go Mountains just to check and load that. Well, the module is not loading. That's because I have no client-side resources pushed into that web app directory. What does that mean? Well, I'm going to go to the Java perspective so I can see the package explorer on the left. Okay, so what I've figured out here is no resources have been pushed to the target directory. So let me go into the next step. So what I want to do is wire up the next step. So I'm going to create a GWT development mode launcher, and so I can debug in the server app folder. So how would I do that? So I'm going to go to my project here, right click on Mountains, my GWT app, and go debug as GWT development mode with Jetty. No, I don't want to do that because I'm going to use my App Engine server. In this case, I'm going to use GWT development mode, which is going to create an entry point for the code server. So I'm going to click on this, and after it starts, I'm going to go ahead and stop the process. Now I'm going to go and edit that configuration by going up to the Bug button and going to Debug Configurations. And once I'm here, I'm going to select the project that I created or the launcher that I created. And over to the right, there's some tabs where I can configure that. Well, I can see it's the code server entry point, and then I'm going to go to the GWT, and I can see that it's got the Mountains module selected, which is over here on the left, module.gwt.xml, and that gets generated into the class path with the Maven module. And then I go to the arguments, and what I'm missing here is the launcher directory. Well, how do I get that launcher directory? Well, let's just start by going and getting that. I'm going to close that, and I'm going to go onto the project, and where is my launcher directory? Okay, so what I want to do is push my resources into this web app folder. I'm going to right click on it and go Properties. And in this case, I'm using this web app folder in this video. In a future video, I'll show you how to tighten up the process a little bit so that generated artifacts go into the target directory. Okay, so I'm going to copy this here, and this is going to be my launcher. And like I said, this is going to be easy to change in the future, but I want to show how the pieces get put together in this configuration. Okay, so apply and close. And what I want to do is go back to the Debug Configurations, and then I'm going to select on Mountains and Arguments. And what I want to add here is Launcher. Oop, it got confused. So let me go a little bit further in. Launcher directory is then equal to Let's say users, brand flag training. Yep, Mountain server, main web app. And then we have the module or modules at the end. And I'm going to select apply. And now that I'm ready, I could simply debug this and let's see what it does. When I select debug, I'm going to grow this window at the bottom and just look at this output. Okay, so what did it do? Let's just look at the console and see what we did here. Okay, so it just basically started up the GUID development mode with code server, and it didn't start a embedded Jetty server. Well, if I go back to development mode, I can see the code server started on localhost. Let me go over to the source and refresh this project. And there it is. There's my Mountains project. Okay, well now I want to verify that in App Engine. Well, let me just click on refresh over here. Okay, there it goes. I immediately refreshed the server and it noticed that there was new resources in the directory and it loaded that into the browser. In this case, it's an embedded browser in Eclipse, and it started the initial compile. And there's my MVP4g project, which I created in the earlier episode. That concludes the stage 1 testing of combining a client-side module and a server-side module in a web applications configuration. So thanks for watching today. Follow me for more tips and tricks on GXT, and I'll catch you later.